Greetings to you all! Since the birth of cinema in 1895, the industry has always been driven by innovation and fierce competition between formats striving to redefine what is possible on a big screen. Adaptation of 35mm film in 1909 laid the foundation for a century of filmmaking. Then came the revolution of sound on film. Systems like Vitaphone and Movietone finally allowed audiences to hear dialogue and music perfectly synced with the picture, transforming the storytelling forever. The following decades brought color and scale to the forefront. With Technicolor in the 1930s and CinemaScope in the 1950s, cinema became more vivid and truly spectacular. By the mid-century, formats like Todayo, Super Panavision 70 and later IMAX pushed immersion to extraordinary levels. The massive film area, incredible clarity and thunderous sound made audiences feel like as they were inside the story. Then came the digital revolution with the DCI standard in 2005. Immersive sound technologies brought a new dimension of realism, and today, with HDR by Barco, we've entered yet another defining chapter in a history of cinema technology. Last October, I had the unique opportunity to visit Barco's headquarters in Kortrijk, Belgium, and experience the opening of their newly refurbished visitor center. Among the many impressive demo spaces, we were also shown Barco's rigorous testing facilities, where products are dropped, shaken, bombarded with high-intensity radio waves, frozen and even lightly baked inside the industrial ovens, all to ensure the highest standards of quality and reliability that Barco is known for. But the highlight of the visit was the Barco Theater, home to the company's latest innovation, the HDR by Barco. The image quality was absolutely breathtaking, a glimpse into the future of cinematic projection. And the best part? More and more screens supporting this technology are already being installed around the world. Now, enough from me. Let's hear directly from Lorenzo, the Strategic Marketing Director at Barco Cinema, who kindly agreed to answer a few of my questions. And just before I start, I have one quick request. Please consider subscribing, giving this video a like, leaving a comment or hitting the notification bell. All of this helps the channel to reach a wider audience and allow me to keep making content like this. And if you would like to support BoardTech channel directly, you can use this super thanks feature here on YouTube, or consider becoming a patron on Patreon. All the links you need are in the video description below.
So at Barco, we see HDR by Barco not just as a new projector launch, but rather the start of a new big industry paradigm shift in cinema. We've always been at the forefront of bringing new technology into cinema and raising the bar for the moviegoer, and we believe we are going to do the same with the introduction of HDR by Barco. Actually, if you look back in time, it all started with a move from analog to digital cinema in the early 2000s. Barco has been one of the pioneers, and about a decade later, in 2014-15, we have made yet another shift from digital lamp to digital laser projection, a shift where Barco has taken the lead and where we have today over half of the world's projectors are being supported and equipped by laser projection in Barco. Now we are again a decade later and we are here to present HDR by Barco, which is a shift from standard dynamic range in laser all the way up to high dynamic range in laser. What we know today in most occasions is standard dynamic range, which has a certain brightness level, darkness level and color spectrum. And so the difference between high dynamic range and standard dynamic range is on multiple levels. First of all, it is the brightness, which is 6 times higher than what you know today. On the flip side, in the darkness levels, we go 5 times darker. So it is literally a factor of 30 difference versus what you know today, which is, I would say, disruptive enough for the average moviegoer to notice that difference versus the standard. Besides that, there is also the color spectrum, and you can see that colors are already vibrant, but they even become much more alive in high dynamic range environments. So we can cover, I would say, the full, what we call Rec 2020 color spectrum, which is something we haven't seen before. So I would say a little bit more about the technology on how we create high dynamic range is via the patented Barco Light Steering technology, which is actually a technology that helps shifting the light to where you want it to be on the screen in the very bright parts, and then at the same time taking light away from the darker parts in the scene where you actually want less light. So we're gonna make smart use of the technology where you don't need 6 more projectors to reflect 6 times more brightness. No, we're gonna actually shift the brightness to those very frames on where we want it to be, so that at the same time, in the very same frame, you can create a lot more darkness to create eventually that high dynamic range. There is something to say about the way that HDR gets into cinema. First of all, it's important to understand that high dynamic range is an open DCI standard. It is not a Barco proprietary format, unlike many other branded options you have out there in the market, which is, I would say, an advantage because it can be a leverage for multiple players that adhere to the DCI HDR open standard. Now, how do we create this is obviously a trajectory that goes from production to post-production to, I would say, distribution and then eventually ending up in the cinema, where Barco has deliberately made a choice to invest also heavily into the post-production side of things to enable the HDR grading. So how do we do that? We have created 2 specific solutions for post-production to enable, on the one hand side, HDR grading, and on the other side, HDR viewing. So the first tool is what we call the Barco HDR Lightbox, and the second one is the Barco Light Steering Projector, as you know it from cinema, but specifically tailored to the needs of post-production. So both tools go hand in hand and will allow the creatives and the colorists to grade HDR made for cinema. As a result, today we aim for more than 30 titles by the end already of 2025. So that was even above our expectation setting, where we see that all major studios are in fact onboarded by the concept and the belief in HDR and its potential. We have seen that working closely with directors and colorists and showcasing them the potential and the capabilities of what HDR can bring in creating even more lifelike pictures in front of the moviegoers. We're very proud of the collaborations that we have with all the major studios, and I'm sure that we will bring even more HDR content in the near future, amazing moviegoers versus what they know today.
To help you navigate the ever-changing world of cinema formats, Barco has created a very useful website. It's a great resource where you can discover films that have been graded in HDR by Barco, both past releases and upcoming ones, and easily find cinemas equipped with this technology. So if you want to experience this format in best possible way, this is the place to start.
With HDR by Barco, we kicked off in 2025, but we're moving fast. We have a couple of exhibitor partners on our side who plan to expand rapidly, amongst others in Europe, for example, View, with whom we have a partnership. In the US, we have multiple partnerships, including Regal Cineworld, B&B, Alamo Drafthouse, and more upcoming. There are a couple of locations already today in the UK that you can visit. Obviously, we have just right behind me the Barco HDR Theatre in our head office, and I'm very excited to announce many more locations in neighboring countries over the coming months. HDR by Barco is meant for the big screen, but also for any other premium screen, right? We don't really distinguish in terms of screen size. For us, it is very important that it becomes part of a premium experience, and that could be medium-sized screens, but also large screens. So we have both the option for a single setup as well as a dual stack to have HDR by Barco presented on the very big screens.
Cinema has always been about progress, from silent frames to surround sound, from black and white to a full-color widescreen. And now, HDR by Barco feels like a next big milestone, a way to make images more alive, more dimensional and closer to what our eyes can truly see. It's an exciting time to be a film lover, so next time you go to the movies, check if it's showing in HDR by Barco and experience what the future of projection really looks like. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Thanks again for watching and I'll see you soon. Goodbye.